and Brandon had been in a relationship for 8 years. On the day he received his doctorate, I specifically requested time off and took a flight to his city, intending to surprise him. I sat in the audience, watching him in his graduation gown, my face filled with pride as he accepted his diploma from the professor. But just as I was about to greet him, a girl rushed onto the stage with flowers and embraced him. "Congratulations," she exclaimed. He lifted her and spun her around, both laughing joyously as petals scattered across the floor. Sitting in the audience, I felt a strange calm, devoid of sadness, anger, or anything at all. Only one thought echoed in my mind. I told you this would happen. Why didn't you listen? I ultimately didn't appear before Brandon. I quietly returned to my hotel, packed my luggage, and went back to my city. I had only taken 1 day off, and my current project was at its most critical phase. Not a minute could be wasted. Perhaps this was the helplessness of the corporate grind. Without time for grief, I had already rushed back to my company, starting overtime to catch up on the day's missed work. The office building was empty late at night, with only me frantically typing away at my keyboard. I desperately wanted to immerse myself in work, to numb my emotions, but I couldn't. Sitting alone in the deserted office, facing the glaring computer screen, my mind uncontrollably replayed the scene of Brandon embracing that girl, their laughter echoing in my ears. They were so happy, which only made me feel more like a joke. I and Brandon met during grad school. Our alma mater was a top-tier technical university in the country. I was admitted directly to the graduate program, while Brandon transferred from another university. As first year of grad school began, I noticed him. He always sat in the front row of the classroom, rarely speaking but always listening intently and taking notes. His thoughtful, furrowed brow was truly captivating. I grew more and more aware of him, and finally, one day I couldn't resist striking up a conversation. Back then, Brandon was extremely shy. He wouldn't even look up when talking to girls. I added him as a friend, and we often chatted, and through our conversations, I learned a lot about him. He had always been a good kid, studious and little else. His family was poor, and his parents and sister worked hard to support his education. He dreamed of becoming a scientist, earning a lot of money, and bringing his parents to live in a big house in the city. I thought he was adorably naive. In my second year of grad school, I confessed my feelings to him, but he rejected me. He said his focus was on his studies, and he wasn't ready for a relationship. After his rejection, I and my roommates went out and got completely wasted, and I felt a sense of relief. Back then, I was naturally lively and never dwelled on anything for too long. But I never expected that half a month later, Brandon would approach me after class, his face flushed, and ask, "Ava, do you really like Ava?" I replied, "Of course." He lowered his head, hesitating several times before speaking. I said, "Don't worry, I won't pester you." I turned to leave, but he pulled me back. Ava, I accept." And just like that, we became a couple. Those early days were incredibly sweet. We ate together in the cafeteria, attended classes together, and studied together in the library. Brandon was extremely diligent in his studies. In the second semester of second year of grad school, both of us received a scholarship. He kept his money for living expenses, while I used mine to buy him his first suit. I remembered how excited he was, hugging me and saying, "Ava, you're too good to me. I don't know how to thank you." I had said, "You don't need to thank me. I love you and you deserve the best of everything." See, I was utterly foolish. During third year of grad school, I started preparing for interviews. I sent out resumes everywhere and finally found a decent job. Brandon's interviews, however, didn't seem to go as smoothly, and he was glum all the time. I kept asking him what was wrong until he finally told me. He said he wanted to continue his doctoral studies. Pursuing academic research had always been his dream, but his family didn't approve and wouldn't provide for his living expenses. I loved him so much then. How could I watch him give up his dream? I said, "It's okay. You go ahead and study. I have a job. I can support you financially." So after graduating third year of grad school, Brandon stayed at the university to pursue his doctorate. I started working. The first month I got paid, I transferred half my salary to him. From then on, it was every single month. Brandon's doctoral expenses were high, and the university's doctoral student subsidy was barely enough to cover anything. And he not only had to support himself, but also intermittently support his parents and sister back home. To provide for his life, I, who had never experienced financial pressure growing up, had to manage my finances meticulously and work tirelessly, competing fiercely for project bonuses. In my third year of work, I earned a promotion opportunity to become a department head, but it was in another city. At the time, I was very hesitant about a long-distance relationship. I and Brandon had been dating for 5 years, and I was already 27. My peers were already starting to settle down and start a family, while Brandon had yet to enter the workforce and still relied on me for support. To say I wasn't anxious at all would be a lie. I also wanted a home of my own. My parents had always respected me and never interfered with my decisions, but even they started to have reservations about Brandon then. My best friend's complaints were even more direct. "You poured your heart and soul into Brandon like this. Why won't he marry you? Is he planning to ditch you after he graduates and marry into money instead?" Finally, I couldn't help but ask Brandon, "Brandon, when can we get married? I really want a home of my own." Brandon swore solemnly to me, "Ava, just bear with it a little longer. 3 years. Just wait for me 3 more years, and I'll graduate. Then you can quit my job and stay home, and I'll be the one to support you financially. We'll buy a big house and we'll get some cats and dogs." I said, "I don't care about the house, I just want you. Let's get a marriage license at City Hall now." But he said we couldn't get married like that. "Ava, trust me. I will give you the most perfect and grand wedding." Despite my suspicions, I still believed him. I thought that deep down, I already knew continuing with Brandon would likely lead nowhere, but I was too stubborn and too proud to admit my failure. I couldn't let go of the 5 years of youth we had spent together, nor could I believe that what was once the most beautiful love would ultimately be just a fleeting dream. Perhaps this was the so-called sunk cost. Later, I still accepted the job transfer and moved to another city. My new job was well-paying but extremely demanding, often requiring me to work late into the night. The result was that I and Brandon communicated less and less. I was exhausted and had no energy for idle chatter with him, and he wouldn't proactively seek me out either. For a long time, we only spoke a few words when I transferred money to him. Colleagues joked that I was supporting a virtual pet, and I wanted to refute it but couldn't find a reason. Time passed quickly. My friends around me started having their second child. Well-meaning relatives kept trying to set me up on blind dates, initially introducing eligible bachelors, slowly progressing to middle-aged divorced men with kids. My parents had even given up hope, tacitly no longer mentioning marriage to me. Yet I was still foolishly waiting for him to graduate with his doctorate and marry me. Ultimately, it was my own foolishness. Who else could I blame? Her phone suddenly rang, interrupting my thoughts. I saw it was a text message from Brandon. "Ava, I graduated with my doctorate today. I really wish you could have seen me." I looked at my phone, wanting to reply. I saw him and Chloe embracing passionately. I saw everything clearly. But after much thought, I decided not to reply. I hadn't yet figured out how to face him, nor how to end this long 7-year relationship. I didn't reply, but Brandon sent another message. "I am very sad. I waited all day and didn't receive a surprise from you." A surprise? What more did he want? After a long pause, I suddenly remembered. A few months ago, I had mentioned to him that I would give him a gift when he graduated. He had had his eye on a luxury watch for a long time. I had indeed bought that watch, and it was still in my suitcase. The watch back was even specially engraved with, "May your future be bright, and your path true." I was truly a total sucker. I dug the watch out of my luggage, and stared at the inscription on the watch back. I really wanted to throw it straight out the window. Ultimately, I couldn't bear to, considering it was bought with 3 months of overtime bonuses. However, an engraved watch couldn't be returned. I hesitated repeatedly, then pulled the watch out of its box and solemnly put it on my own wrist. I thought, I bought this watch for myself, and it's perfectly suited for me. I thought this watch could also serve as a reminder. Every time I saw it, I would remember how incredibly foolish and ridiculous I once was. While I was working hard to earn money to support Brandon, what was he doing? I was truly stupid. A day later, I received another message from Brandon. He said, "Ava, I'm looking for a place and I'm a bit short on cash. Could you send this month's living expenses early?" Sure enough, he only remembered me when he needed money. Looking back on these years, I felt truly ridiculous. I didn't reply. I knew Brandon was too proud. Even if he needed money, he was too embarrassed to ask twice. But this time, for some reason, his text messages kept coming. "Ava, are you busy? Ava, I've found a house in a desirable district, right in the city center. If I don't sign the lease soon, someone else will rent it. Ava, I know I might have neglected you lately, but graduation has been so hectic. I'll definitely make it up to you later. Ava, I urgently need money. Even if you just transfer $2,000, that would help." I watched his text messages come in one after another. In just 10 minutes, there were more messages than in the past month. Just then, my colleague Mia came over to get some files. She teased, "What, your virtual pet is asking for money again?" I sighed and gave a bitter smile. Mia, standing beside me, felt I was being taken advantage of. Isn't he still studying at university? How does he spend money like water? Mia was right. Half of my monthly salary went to Brandon. With the other half, I had to pay rent, buy food, and cover living expenses. Yet I still managed to save some money each month. How could he spend everything down to the last penny every single month? I suddenly had an idea. I opened my mobile banking app and checked Brandon's transaction history. The bank card he used was still under my name, making it very easy to check. But seeing the lines of transaction history, my heart ached. Flowers on holidays, the first latte of the fall, tickets to a theater performance, a Tiffany bracelet, and a romantic dinner at a fancy restaurant. Whose affections had he been trying to win with my money? I followed the trail and checked his ticket booking history, discovering he had recently booked train tickets and a hotel for two to a certain Willow Creek. I suddenly remembered that about half a year ago, I had stumbled upon photos of Willow Creek scenery on social media. The tranquil, picturesque bridges and flowing streams seemed like my dream haven. I had forwarded the photos to Brandon, hoping we could visit together when he had time. I wondered who he had invited to go with him now. Perhaps it was Chloe. As I looked at these things, I felt strangely calm, with no anger whatsoever. I wasn't even sad. Instead, it was a huge relief. I had been entangled with Brandon for so long, and now I could finally cut ties completely. I called to cancel that bank card. Many of Brandon's accounts were linked to this card. By canceling it, he would likely be in a frantic state for a while. But what did that have to do with me anymore? I opened my social media and started deleting information related to Brandon. It was only then that I realized I had mentioned him publicly less and less over the years. Even joint photos hadn't been posted in years. I slowly scrolled back and finally found the last occasion I and Brandon posted a joint photo. It was still from our university days. The young couple in the photo smiled happily. We must have truly loved each other then. But why did that love fade? I thought for a long time, but couldn't find an answer. I searched through my phone's photo album, but couldn't find a single more recent joint photo. It was clear we no longer loved each other. There would be 1,000 pieces of evidence. But how had I failed to notice it before? After getting home from work, I started tidying up my apartment. I thought there would be many gifts from Brandon, considering I had been with him for 7 years. However, when I actually started packing, I found pitifully few, not even enough to fill one box. Looking back, I had indeed given him many things, but he hadn't given me much in return. I remembered his first gift to me was a thick notebook, every page meticulously filled with his handwritten class notes and key concepts. On the last page, he had written his hopes and blessings for our future. At the time, I had been deeply touched. Back then, I loved everything he gave me: ugly stuffed animals, handmade cards, cheap, unbranded perfume. He always said he was poor and couldn't afford nice things for me. But he promised to repay me tenfold when he earned money in the future. I always smiled and said I didn't care. But what else had he given me later? 3 months ago on my birthday, he only sent a happy birthday text. To whom did that Tiffany bracelet in his shopping history go? And those flowers and lattes? With whom did he watch that theater performance? And who did he share that expensive candlelit dinner with? I thought I shouldn't care about these things. Since I had already decided to cut ties completely with him, what was the point of dwelling on them? It would only cause more trouble. But I couldn't let go. I was truly pathetic. Though I repeatedly told myself to let go, to end it, I still couldn't let go. I had wasted 8 whole years. Should I really just give up like this? Brandon's call finally came. He hadn't called me in 3 months. However, from the moment I canceled that bank card until he called, less than 3 hours had passed. I answered the phone. Brandon's voice was gentle as he asked, "Ava, are you doing well recently?" I bit my lip and remained silent. Brandon then said, "Ava, I know you're upset, but I didn't mean to ignore you. I've just been busy with graduation, and I'm doing this for our future. Please don't make a fuss." I couldn't hold it in any longer. I said, "Brandon, I saw it. On your graduation day, that girl came on stage to give you flowers, and you spun her around in a hug. I saw all of it." He was silent for a moment before speaking again. "She's just Chloe, Ava. I have a clean conscience with her. There's nothing between us. How could you accuse me like that? Ava, I'm so disappointed in you. If you don't trust me like this, then there's really no point in us continuing." Yes, he flared up in anger and even turned around and accused me. I said, "Fine," and hung up the phone. Brandon didn't call back. I thought he was probably waiting for me to come apologize to him. In our 8 years of dating, I and Brandon had arguments, but it seemed I was always the one to concede. He probably thought I would back down this time too. But I wouldn't. I packed all the ugly stuffed animals and other things he had given me and sent them to him by courier, sent it with postage due. Mia, my colleague and best friend, was the first to discover that I and Brandon had broken up. The next day after work, she excitedly rushed over to me. "Ava, why did you delete everything from your social media? Did you break up with your virtual pet?" I nodded. Mia was ecstatic. "That's great. You finally broke up with him. I wanted to say it for so long. What even is Brandon? He doesn't deserve you at all. You finally got your head on straight." "Honey," I said, "I really want to get completely wasted." Mia said, "I've been waiting for you to say that, sis. We found a barbecue joint that's open late, ordered a bunch of skewers, and a case of ice-cold beer." I was silent as I drank the first bottle. By the third bottle, I was telling Mia about what I saw at the graduation ceremony. I told her about the watch that cost me 3 months of bonuses, the Tiffany bracelet I never received, and the box of ugly stuffed animals at my apartment. By the 5th bottle, I started laughing. I laughed and sang and cried. Mia laughed with me. I suddenly realized I hadn't laughed so freely in a long time. By the 7th bottle, I took out my phone and immediately deleted Brandon's contact information, blocked all his accounts, and from then on, cut ties completely. No matter how deeply etched the love, after 7 beers, it was nothing. After breaking up with Brandon, my life was unexpectedly peaceful. Work, overtime, occasional dinners with colleagues, everything was the same as before. Suddenly, a domineering CEO suddenly appearing as a suitor after a breakup is something that only happens in novels, not real life. However, there was one difference. No longer having to worry about supporting Brandon's life, I could indulge in buying things for myself. Cosmetics, jewelry, beautiful clothes, mystery boxes, collectible figures, graphic novels, all the things I had hesitated to buy before, I could now buy to my heart's content. I could also eat whatever I craved. And I had always wanted to get a kitten, but because Brandon was allergic to cat fur, I had to give up on the idea. Now that Brandon was out of my life, I could finally consider getting a cat. Just then, I saw a friend's post on social media about a kitten found for adoption, and I immediately messaged to inquire. And so, I got my first kitten, a male calico cat, and I named him Felix. Felix, true to his name, was as affectionate as a dog and even plays fetch. Coming home from work, I would sit on the sofa watching movies, and Felix would curl up sweetly at my feet, his fluffy head resting on my lap, his ears twitching. Such days were truly delightful. I couldn't help but regret not cutting ties completely with Brandon sooner. However, on second thought, I should actually be grateful to Brandon. I had always been someone with little ambition. If it weren't for earning money to support Brandon, I might have long ago given up this high-paying but demanding job and returned to his hometown. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have worked so tirelessly, nor would I have accepted that promotion. One could say that Brandon truly made me who I was. It was because of him that I now had such a good job and position, enabling me to enjoy such a comfortable life. However, my comfortable life lasted less than 3 months before it was interrupted. Brandon showed up with his luggage. He came on a Thursday when I was at work. I guess he might have intentionally chosen a weekday, knowing I would be at work, so he could secretly move his things into my place and catch me off guard. But he didn't expect me to have changed the lock. I had Felix to thank for that. When I adopted him, a friend advised me to change to a smart lock at home to prevent the kitten from sneaking out, so I did. That's why I received a smart lock alert from home while at work, and when I opened the security camera, I saw Brandon's face. Truly bad luck. I remotely checked my smart lock. It was sturdy and there was no way he could have opened it. So I continued working. After all, for me as a corporate grind, nothing was more important than work. Absolutely nothing. Finally, quitting time arrived. I opened the smart lock camera to check, and found that Brandon was still waiting at the door. I immediately decided to voluntarily work overtime. I stayed at my company working late into the night, and when I checked the smart lock camera again, Brandon had finally left. I quickly took a taxi/rideshare home. Felix was waiting for me to feed him, but I truly hadn't expected Brandon to show up at my company the next day. This was incredibly embarrassing. He stood stubbornly at the company entrance, drawing frequent glances from colleagues. It was utterly humiliating. I had worked for so many years and had never been so embarrassed. It seemed I absolutely had to end things with him. I requested time off from my boss to go out and meet him. My frustration and impatience were clear on my face, but Brandon seemed oblivious, smiling at me. He asked, "Ava, are you doing well recently?" I said, "Let's talk at the coffee shop." I led him to the coffee shop in the park. They ordered 2 coffees. The coffee shop was nearly empty during work hours, cold and deserted. The coffee arrived quickly, but its taste was very ordinary. Brandon silently watched me, but I was in no mood to waste time with him. I said, "Did you come to see me about something? If not, I'll go back to work." "Ava." He just stared at me without speaking. I couldn't stand his hesitant, shy manner. I said, "All right, I'm going back then." I stood up to leave. He finally spoke. "Ava, don't go." "Ava, I have something to say to you." Then say it quickly," Brandon said. "Ava, are you still mad at me? You really misunderstood me. There's nothing going on between me and Chloe." I couldn't help but laugh. "Brandon, what you're saying would have been interesting 3 months ago. Now that we've been broken up for 3 months, don't you think it's a bit too late?" He vehemently defended himself. "Broken up? I didn't break up with you," I said. "You were the one who said there was no need for us to continue. I returned all the gifts you gave me. Didn't you receive them?" "Ava, that was just something I said in anger." He said, "I didn't want to break up with you, Ava. We have 8 years of history. We agreed that we'd get married once I graduated. How could I want to break up with you?" I coldly sized him up. "I didn't realize, Brandon, that you'd stoop so low." I said, "Why did we break up? Don't you have a clue? You spent my money taking Chloe to theater performances, to fancy restaurants, and even gave her a Tiffany bracelet. Did you think I wouldn't know? Oh, and you even planned a graduation trip to Willow Creek, didn't you? Why didn't you go? Was it because I stopped your bank card and you ran out of money? I originally thought a breakup was a breakup, and we'd both maintain some dignity, so some things didn't need to be said explicitly. But you take advantage of my kindness and throw it away. Do I really have to spell everything out for you to understand?" Brandon's face flushed crimson, and he stammered, unable to speak. Seeing him like this, I truly regretted how I had been so blind to fall for someone like him. I said, "In short, Brandon, I and you have cut ties completely. Have some decency and stop bothering me, okay?" With those words, I stood up and strode away. When I returned to my cubicle, Mia immediately leaned in. "Ava, did that jerk come looking for you again?" He couldn't be regretting it and wanting to get back together, could he? I snorted dismissively. He doesn't deserve it, what a joke. Mia said, I'm so glad you think that way, Ava. I'm relieved. I was worried you'd go soft. I said, you have no idea how happy I have been these past 3 months since breaking up with Brandon. I will absolutely never go soft, and besides, I have Felix now. Mia is right, cats are so much better than men. I opened my computer and started working. After a while, Mia leaned in again. Ava, I think this is highly suspicious. You and Brandon broke up a long time ago. Him suddenly coming to find you now must mean something. You need to be careful not to get scammed by him. I nodded. Mia made a lot of sense. Brandon was most arrogant and image-conscious. The fact that he would proactively come to me and humble himself was indeed highly suspicious. I thought for a moment, then opened a commonly used social media app, and found Brandon's account. Brandon's social media persona had always been that of an aloof and brilliant doctoral student. His account rarely posted content, and when it did, it was usually academic-related. I didn't expect to find any clues. His most recent post was still his doctoral graduation photo. However, beneath that post, I saw comments from several accounts, all demanding payment. I clicked on one of the accounts and saw it belonged to one of Brandon's classmates. I couldn't help but send a private message to inquire about the situation. The person quickly replied, and after a brief chat, I understood the whole story. The commenter's name was David, a junior lab member in Brandon's lab. According to him, after Brandon graduated with his doctorate, he interviewed with several companies, but none of them seemed to go well. Brandon's niche major meant there weren't many job options to begin with, and he was also particularly picky, wanting a high-paying and respectable job, so he ultimately didn't get what he wanted. It was also normal that he ran out of money. In recent years, under my financial support, Brandon pursued a lavish lifestyle and had long grown accustomed to high spending. Now that I no longer supported him, he hadn't changed his lifestyle in time, so he quickly ran out of money. Thus, he began borrowing money from classmates and friends. Previously, Brandon had never borrowed money, and he was always generous and had excellent credit. So David didn't suspect anything and lent him money. However, as time passed, Brandon still hadn't found a job and couldn't repay his debts, and he kept borrowing more. David waited 2 months, and when Brandon still didn't offer to repay the money, he finally couldn't help but demanding payment. At that point, Brandon went off the grid, not answering calls or text messages, and even blocked his number. David, left with no choice, messaged Brandon on social media, and that's how he encountered me. Finally, David asked me, Ava, did Brandon borrow money from you too? I felt a mix of emotions and for a moment didn't know how to answer. I now understood why Brandon had came back groveling, wanting to reconcile. He clearly couldn't find a job and had no money, so he came looking for a new sucker. Amidst my anger, I also felt lucky that I had escaped Brandon, that jerk. Given the situation, I decided to tell David the truth. At least I could prevent him from being scammed by Brandon too. I said, I'm the total sucker ex-girlfriend who supported Brandon through 5 years of his doctorate. David was shocked into silence. That afternoon, I was diligently working when a text message's friend request popped up. It was a girl's profile picture, with the nickname Naomi. I inexplicably had a hunch that she was coming for Brandon. I accepted her friend request. The other side quickly sent a message. Excuse me, are you Brandon's girlfriend? I replied, we've already broken up. The other side asked again, when did you break up? 3 months ago. The other side was silent for a long time, then sent a message. I'm sorry. You're the girl who gave him flowers at the graduation ceremony, aren't you? The girl initiated a voice call. Her voice was somewhat choked up. I'm sorry, Ava. I didn't know he had a girlfriend. He never said anything. I always thought he was single. I didn't mean to ruin your relationship. Ava, I really didn't know. I said, it's not your fault. It's all Brandon's fault, that jerk. The girl cried and said much more. She said her name was Chloe, and she was in her 2nd year of grad school, and she, Brandon, and David were all in the same lab. Brandon, as Brandon, had helped her a lot with her studies. He was gentle and cultured, knowledgeable, taking her to theater performances and fancy restaurants, treating her with tenderness and meticulous care. How could she not fall for him? She said she and Brandon had planned to travel to Willow Creek together after he graduated. She had thought he would propose to her there, but Brandon canceled the trip at the last minute. Not only that, but in the following 2 months, he became irritable and uncontrollable due to failed job interviews, often taking his anger out on her, ignoring her, and eventually even went off the grid. I asked, "You didn't lend him money too, did you?" She said she did. I said, "It's going to be very hard to get back. But don't be too sad. Look, I supported him for 5 whole years, being a total sucker for 5 years. You're cutting your losses." Chloe started laughing through her tears and said, "I don't care about the money, but are you really just going to let this go? That's too easy on him. He deceived us, played with our feelings. We have to make him pay." I said, "Forget it. Wasting time on trash isn't worth it." Chloe, "No, I couldn't let it go." The turn of events completely exceeded my expectations. Chloe and I actually became good friends. If there was anything that could tightly bond two people, it was shared resentment. And Chloe and I just happened to have such a target, Brandon. Before we knew it, we hit it off really well. I also learned about Chloe's family background. She was an only child, her father a retired university professor, her mother a doctor. Her family had quite a bit of influence. We quickly came to a common conclusion. Brandon pursued Chloe because he was interested in her family's connections. As for why Brandon still wouldn't break up with me, he probably thought I was hopelessly in love with him, naive and wealthy, and wanted to keep me as a backup plan. Although I was utterly disappointed with Brandon, I was still shocked by his level of shamelessness. Chloe was equally indignant. She said, "It's too much, way too much." After a while, Chloe said, "I have an idea." Chloe said she planned to turn the tables and trick Brandon, making him cough up all the money he had scammed from everyone. This would require my cooperation. Okay, but I still have to work, so I might not be able to help you much. Chloe, don't worry, it won't be too much trouble. Just lend me your text messages account, and I will talk to him. So I authorized Chloe to log into my messaging app account on her computer. Chloe unblocked Brandon from her block list and deliberately sent him a message, then unsent it. Brandon indeed took the bait. He quickly sent messages, the same old routine of reminiscing, repenting, and begging for forgiveness. Chloe feigned a hesitant tone and played along, drawing him out. Thus, I worked while occasionally glancing at their chat history, which was truly astounding. Brandon actually believed I would forgive him. This man was indeed hopelessly overconfident. The next day, Chloe continued chatting with Brandon using my account. Brandon had completely bought into the idea that I had forgiven him, and even shamelessly started asking me for money again, saying, "You have to spend money to make money." I promptly transferred $5,000 to him. Meanwhile, Chloe forwarded me a chat history she had with Brandon using her own account. Just as I transferred the money to Brandon, he immediately transferred half of it to Chloe to repay her debt, and even ordered her a latte. Truly, utterly shameless. Here's their chat history. "Why weren't you talking to me recently? I thought you hated me." "How could I? I was just busy looking for a job." "Oh, I saw Cortex Solutions is hiring recently. My father knows the general manager of Cortex Solutions. If you want to go, I can ask my father to put in a good word." "Wouldn't that be too much trouble for your father?" "Oh, I also think you'll definitely find an even better job with your own abilities. Cortec Group is a company with great development prospects. If there's an opportunity, I would really like to learn more about it." "That's great. Do you want to come to my house this weekend? To meet your father? I have told him a lot about you. He really wants to meet you." "Okay, I don't know what your father likes. What gift should I bring?" "No need, my dad doesn't smoke or drink. Please don't go to any trouble." I had to admire Chloe for being able to stomach playing along with Brandon. If it were me, I probably would have burst out cursing long ago. Chloe laughed. "That wasn't me, that was David chatting with him using my account." I was shocked again. I didn't realize David was so talented too. Chloe. "Yes, he also said that only men truly understand men. And he was right. I never thought Brandon would fall for it so quickly. The next day, Brandon rushed back to the university, making a beeline to ingratiate himself with Chloe. That weekend, Chloe brought Brandon home. The Hahn family lived in a mansion, and Chloe's father graciously received Brandon, invited him for dinner, and even promised to help him arrange a job at Cortex Solutions. Afterward, Chloe told me that the mansion was rented. As for the father, he wasn't her dad but the manager of a haunted house, who was also an amateur actor, where David worked. I couldn't help but clap and laugh. "You guys are incredible," Chloe said. "Of course. We rehearsed for a long time to put on this show." According to Chloe, during their dinner, Mr. Sterling deliberately and casually showed off the Rolex watch on his wrist and the luxury car keys in his pocket, and even took a call discussing a multi-million-dollar investment. Despite this exaggerated display of wealth, Brandon completely bought it. That very evening, he confessed his feelings to Chloe, and Chloe reluctantly agreed. Next, it was time to close the trap. David, with a large group of people, cornered them while Chloe and Brandon were having dinner, politely demanding Brandon repay his debt. Brandon was extremely embarrassed and repaid the money on the spot. However, that very afternoon he started asking me for money via text messages. At this point, the master of emotions, David, intervened again. "Ava, I love you the most," I said, "then let's get married." "It's too rushed to talk about marriage now, Ava. Could you lend me some money first? Once I find a job and settle down, we'll get married, okay? You're not still thinking about Chloe, are you? Her name is Chloe, right?" He tried to video call me, but I declined. He immediately continued sending messages. "Ava, trust me, I and Chloe have absolutely no relationship. Please don't go looking for her." I nearly burst out laughing. "What are you afraid of? Do you have something to hide?" Just then, David, operating on two fronts, sent a message to Brandon using Chloe's account. "Who is Ava? What's your relationship with her? She said you owe her a lot of money. Is that true? What are these transfer records? Have you repaid her?" Meanwhile, my account was relentlessly pursuing Brandon. "Brandon, what's your relationship with Chloe? You two-timing jerk. How could you betray me, betray our 5-year relationship? What do you think Chloe would think if she knew you'd been spending my money for the past 5 years?" Under the dual assault from both accounts, Brandon was on the verge of a breakdown. He called me again, and this time I answered myself. "Ava, please don't do anything rash. I can explain about Chloe," I said. "I don't want to hear explanations. Brandon, I am already too disappointed in you. In these 5 years, I have given you over 300,000, right? Let's just say 300,000. Return the money to me, and we'll part ways peacefully." "Ava, don't be like this," I said. "You betrayed me. Are you forcing me to confront Chloe and make this public?" Brandon panicked. "Please don't, Ava. I'm begging you," I said. "If you don't return the money within an hour, I will send all our chat history to Chloe." After speaking, I hung up. Mia, who had been observing the entire time, commented that my last words sounded especially like a mafia boss. I said, "You flatter me." An hour later, Brandon really did transfer the money. To be honest, I hadn't expected to get the money back. When I initially supported Brandon, I genuinely wanted to help him and didn't expect anything in return, but he had trampled on my sincerity. At that moment, the knot of frustration in my chest finally unraveled, a weight that had been pressing down on me for 3 months. I was so happy, and I knew it was entirely Chloe and David's doing. I carefully selected a gift for each of them, intending to give it to them in person. Of course, I also wanted to witness the final act of this excellent play, so I requested time off from my boss and took a late-night flight to Brandon City. The next morning, I first met with David. To my surprise, David was a muscular man nearly 6 feet 3 inches tall. While he was eloquent and talkative in online chats, he was very shy and spoke sparingly in person, truly a charming contrast. Then we both rushed to a coffee shop near the university and chose an inconspicuous corner seat. Soon after, Chloe and Brandon arrived. Brandon was overjoyed and completely oblivious, not noticing either of us, but we could hear their conversation. Brandon spoke first. "Has your father put in a good word for the Cortec Group job?" Chloe said. I have thought about it carefully for a long time, Brandon. Perhaps it's better if we go our separate ways. Brandon immediately panicked. Why? I already said there's nothing between me and Ava. I really didn't lie to you. Why can't you trust me? Besides, I've already paid back all the money I borrowed from her. If you don't believe me, you can see the transfer records. Chloe. I believe you. I just think we're not a good fit. Brandon. What's not a good fit? Chloe finally couldn't help but laugh. You're too stupid. That's why we're not a good fit. She stood up and said to me, I'm starving, let's go eat. I said, okay. I'm treating, order whatever you like. Brandon turned around and finally saw me. At that moment, the expression on his face was a mix of shock and utter disbelief. It was truly amusing. He stood frozen, mouth agape, completely dumbfounded. It wasn't until I, Chloe, and David walked out of the coffee shop together that Brandon finally reacted. He chased after them, shouting like a madman. Ava! Chloe! You two! You're in on this together! You conspired to trick me! Chloe turned and gave him a brilliant smile. What? Only you're allowed to trick us, but we're not allowed to trick you back. Brandon still wouldn't give up. He chased after them, trying to grab Chloe, but David blocked him. David said, Brandon, have some decency. Under the oppressive presence of David's 6'3" frame, Brandon timidly backed down. I treated Chloe and David to the most expensive seafood dinner. After dinner, I took out the gifts I had bought for them. At first, they refused to accept them, but my persistence eventually wore them down, and they finally took them. I gave each of them a watch, both engraved. Then I took a flight back to my company to work overtime. Later, I heard bits and pieces about Brandon. I heard he went to the police station to report Chloe for fraud, but he couldn't articulate what Chloe had defrauded him of, merely throwing tantrums and being unreasonable. He was ultimately kicked out by the officer. She also heard that the money he repaid me was borrowed from an online loan with very high interest. He struggled with several jobs, none lasting long, and eventually couldn't repay the money. He was reported his contacts to debt collectors by the online loan company, and his reputation was utterly ruined. The last time I heard about him, it was said he couldn't make a living in the city and went back to his hometown. While I felt a surge of schadenfreude, I also felt a sense of pity. The boy who once studied diligently and aspired to be a scientist, how did he become this way? Or perhaps, vanity and greed were his true nature all along? In any case, it no longer concerned me. My current life goal was singular: to work hard, get promoted, and earn more. Men might betray you, but money never will.